The night was cold and the sky was painted with a blanket of stars. But inside the dimly lit mansion perched on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a deep, unsettling silence hung in the air. Leonardo DiCaprio sat at his grand oak desk, flipping through the pages of an old worn-out book he had found in an antique shop while filming in Europe. Something about the book had called to him, an inexplicable pull that made him purchase it without a second thought. The book had no title, no author, just a leather cover worn with time and strange symbols etched into its spine. Each page was filled with cryptic writings, some in Latin, others in an unfamiliar dialect. As Leonardo traced his fingers over the words, a peculiar feeling washed over him, a sense of déjà vu, as if he had seen these words before in another life. That's when it happened. A gust of wind, despite all the windows being closed, swept through the room, extinguishing the candle that flickered on his desk. The temperature dropped drastically, and a whisper, almost imperceptible, echoed from the corners of the room. "You found it! At last!" Leonardo spun around, heart pounding. The room was empty. He swallowed hard, shaking his head. He had been working too much, reading too deeply into his scripts, immersing himself too far into his roles. That's what it had to be. But the whisper returned. "Open page 77. His hands trembled as he flipped through the fragile pages until he reached the designated number. There in the middle of the page was a black and white sketch of a man who looked eerily similar to himself. Beneath the drawing, the name Leonardo was written in ancient calligraphy. His breath caught in his throat. Was this some elaborate hoax? Had someone planted this book for him to find? Then the room shifted. The walls rippled as if they were made of liquid, and suddenly he was no longer in his study. He stood in a grand hall filled with men and women dressed in 15th century attire. Golden chandeliers illuminated the space, and a large mirror stood at the center of the room. His reflection was different. He was dressed in a luxurious robe, his hair tied back in an old-fashioned manner, a nobleman's attire. Gasps filled the room as the people around him recognized him. "Leonardo da Vinci!" someone called out, falling to their knees. Leonardo DiCaprio stumbled backward. This couldn't be real. He had read about method acting, taking actors to deep psychological places. But this was something else entirely. A woman approached, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Master Leonardo, you have returned to us at last. The book, it was the key, the one that binds your soul through time." He wanted to run, to wake up from what had to be a vivid dream. But the warmth of the room, the weight of the robe on his shoulders, the sheer authenticity of everything around him. This was not a dream. This isn't possible," he muttered, shaking his head. An old man stepped forward, holding a familiar book, the same one he had been reading in his study. "The book chose you because you are him. You have always been him. You lived many lives, Leonardo, across centuries, creating, discovering. But each time you forget, until you find the book again." His head spun. He felt dizzy, overwhelmed. Was he truly Da Vinci reborn? Was he living in an endless cycle, destined to rediscover himself with each life? Suddenly the walls rippled again, and just as quickly as he had arrived, he was back in his study. The candle on his desk reignited on its own, casting flickering shadows against the walls. He gasped for breath, his hands clutching the book. Had he imagined it all? Had he dozed off while reading? But then he noticed something different. The mirror across the room, which had always been crystal clear, was now aged, cracked, and covered in a faint layer of dust. And in the center of the glass, etched as if by an invisible hand, were 3 words: "Remember the truth." Leonardo DiCaprio's fingers tightened around the book. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning.